While states like Georgia and Florida pass strict new voting regulations, Republicans in the Senate are blocking a bill to expand voting rights. Politico reports it this way. Quote, Democrats are preparing to kick off a sensitive internal debate over the issue this month, but no Republicans support it. Senator Joe Manchin hasn't signed on, and at least a half dozen Democrats have issues with the bill. Our guests remain with us, Cornell Belcher and Michael Steele. Cornell, at a later date, somebody can explain to me how a senator from West Virginia, who people call a dino, Democrat in name only, is suddenly the second most powerful person in Washington. Again, conversation for another time. You do hear a lot of mainstream Democrats on voter suppression say, don't reach for the stars, reach consensus. Give us a clean bill to clean up voting rights. On that front, the Democrats who are watching the Republicans do this just think they're watching a suicide mission. Your life's work is polling. Do you think there's any chance the Republicans are poll-driven on some of this stuff and they're going to lay down their bet on the table because of that?
Brian, they're driven. They're driven by the results of elections, and this story carries over from the last story we just talked about here. Republicans can't be for expanding voting rights. Republicans can't be for making it easier for every American to vote. Look, there's a fundamental value here. You ask Americans, should it be easier to vote or harder to vote? And overwhelmingly, Americans think it should be easier to vote. But you see these voting laws, these what some have called Jim Crow 2.0 voting laws being enacted in state after state. Guess what? Because of, again, the big lie. And I said this months ago when the big lie sort of surfaced, that in the end, this is going to be justification for them putting up hurdles to people voting. And by people, I mean people of color, right? So you have states like Georgia that are increasingly competitive because of the growth of the black vote, and you see that growing, so the black and brown vote growing through the Sun Belt. So no, Republicans can't possibly be for expanding voting rights and letting everyone vote if they're in fact going to be the tribal party. So it's a full cyclical problem for the Republican Party. They're double down on tribalism, and if they double down on tribalism, they have to sort of block the vote and make it harder for people of color to vote. But the future belongs to a party that can be bigger, not smaller, right? If you look in the crystal ball here, you understand that the future does not belong to the narrowing coalition of voters that surround Donald Trump. They're going to have to get bigger, or Chairman Steele is going to have to become a Democrat.
Well, Chairman Steele, since your name was invoked, here's my second question in a row for you, Chairman Steele, that deals with the chance of backfiring. All these state provisions that governors are signing, what's the chance, you and I've talked about this before, that it's going to backfire on the voters the Republicans want?
I still think the chance is very high. Brian, I'm drawn to a quote that actually applies to the last segment where a member of the caucus, in talking about Liz Cheney, said, does Cheney's stubborn insistence to stick with her convictions rub some of us wrong? Yes. And as I talk about this issue, just take out everything and put in voting. Does voting equity, does voting opportunity, does voting freedom rub us wrong? Yes. And that's where the party is. And it's so unfortunate because they can actually be a leader in this space. They can actually, carve up some new ground here for Americans to access the ballot box. But they have bought into this narrative that Cornell referenced, this big lie narrative, in such a way that they're stuck. And with the leadership that's currently in place, which, again, is why Liz Cheney stands out. She's standing on principle. She called the thing what it is, and that is a lie, and that there was no fraud in the 2020 election, and that anyone who perpetuates that is a liar and a fraud. And so instead of leaning into leadership, they're leaning back into Trump. And so voters will have a chance as they get ready for 2022, and they're standing in those lines, and they don't have access to the ballots the way they did in 2020, and they can't get to the poll, or they're being penalized or their behavior criminalized. They'll know exactly who brought all of that to them. And the question they then will have to ask themselves, is that who you vote for?
Well put again. And Cornell, I know you caught this. Michael coming on my show reading quotes. Usually the anchor's job, but he's got a podcast now, so he's all anchory. Unbelievable. Thank goodness we're all friends.
He's going to have to invite me on his podcast.
Love you both, Cornell Belcher, Michael Steele. I'm going to come on your podcast and read quotes. Gentlemen, thank you both. We'll do this again.